morning, everyone. I'm Meredith Dancuz. I'm the lead pastor here at The Well. If you are joining us online or on the app, you can go ahead and fill out the digital Connect card there and let us know that you're joining us digitally. And if you're in person, you have the app. You can fill out the app now and let us know you're here and how we can pray for you. Or we have paper Connect cards if you're new over at our welcome area back there. And we have a great newcomer gift for you if you're here and want to learn more about who we are, so you can come connect with Steve over at the welcome area after church. So we're in our final week of relationship, where we've been talking about the different relationship killers. And I don't know about you, but do you have a food that if someone were to serve it to you, you were go to someone's house, they were to serve it to you, you just couldn't even be polite to eat it? Like, you couldn't even take a bite of it? I'm sure you do. For me, it is beef stew. It's beef stew. And there's a reason why. Like, if you invite me over and you are making beef stew, I'm going to say, I'm so sorry. I cannot eat this. We need to find something else, or I'll eat somewhere else. Because when I was in college, my mom had made us some beef stew, made me some beef stew, and I brought it back, and my roommates and I we ate a little bit of it, but then you kind of get sick of it. It's not a food that you want to eat like every day for weeks on end. And so there was one container of it that got in the back of our fridge, and you know where this might be going, right? And it was that container that, like, every time one of my roommates or I opened it, we thought, we should probably clean that out eventually. And it sat there for a long time, like real. I mean, we were in college, right? And so eventually I was like, I need to clean this out. And I took it out, and it had turned blue. The whole thing had turned blue, right? And so it was just like, I can't. And so I associate beef stew with blue now, and no food is naturally blue that you should be eating. So what I learned that day, though, an important life lesson: when things get stuck, they go bad, right? When things get stuck, they go bad. In the fridge, they go bad. And in life, when things get stuck, they go bad, especially emotions. When emotions get stuck, doesn't go so well. I always say emotions are like water, right? They come in and they go out. Some come in and go out real fast. Some come in and take a little bit longer to go out, but they should all go out. It's when they get bottled up, when they get stuck, we end up in all sorts of bad territory. And this is especially true when it comes to anger. When it comes to anger, which is why Paul has some particular words about what it looks like to deal with anger. And so in Ephesians, the book of Ephesians, and in this series we've been jumping back and forth between Ephesians and Colossians. They're two letters that Paul wrote while he was in prison at the same time. So there's a lot of overlap between them. And so when he's writing to the Ephesians, he says this: in your anger, do not sin. Do not let the sun go down while you are still angry, and do not give the devil a foothold. And so what's important here to note is that Paul does not say do not get angry. Right? He doesn't prohibit anger. He doesn't say anger is a sin, it's bad, run away from it, no anger allowed, right? What he does is he acknowledges the reality of anger. When you get angry, you will eventually get angry. But the wording there is that it's very temporary and situational. It's not an ongoing thing, right? So when something makes you angry, he says, do not sin. And the reason why he says that is because anger is a volatile emotion, right? When you feel angry, you are more likely to do or say something that you would regret if you were in a different state of mind. So we're more likely to lose our temper, to say angry words. And so a lot of us avoid anger, if we're honest. Like, we just flee from it. We think, no, anger is pretty much up there with sinful. Like, no anger. And that's when we run into problems. When we have anger and we don't deal with it. Because Paul says, don't let the sun set on your anger. And now, some people have tried to turn that into a hard and fast rule. Like, if we're in a fight, we can't go to bed until we have resolved it. I can tell you that doesn't normally go very well, right? Because you get to a point where you're not listening to each other anymore, right? You're both angry, you're both tired, and the rule of, like, we have to stay up and hash this out is not going to benefit you. And that's not really what Paul is getting at, because for Jews, the setting of the sun was the starting of a new day, right? For us, the rising of a sun is the starting of a new day, but for them, it was the setting of the sun. So what Paul is saying is, don't carry it over. Don't start your day in an angry mindset. Don't let it go unresolved. That's what he's saying. It's not like stay up all night and argue. It's don't keep carrying anger over. Why? He says, because when you do, you let the devil get a foothold. And that word foothold means a place. It means that you've sectioned off a place for someone to inhabit. So he says, when you let anger stay stuck. When it comes in and it just stays there, it's going to go bad. Why? Because the devil, it's like you're basically sectioning off a place in your life, in your emotional life, to let the devil do whatever he wants, right? To let the devil work from there. And Jesus is pretty clear about what Satan does, what his agenda is. He says this in John, the thief comes only to steal, kill, and destroy, right? So that's Satan's intentions, to kill, steal, and destroy. To kill, steal, and destroy peace, joy, unity, love, just to wreak havoc on that, right? So unresolved anger is like sectioning off a place in your life to let the devil come in and kill, steal, and destroy your relationships. And when we let that go unresolved, the reason why it becomes such a problem is that we make way for what is known as resentment. Resentment. And resentment comes from unresolved or unforgiven anger. And Henry Nouwen, I love the way he describes resentment, because he says it's first anger that burns hot. Like when you're mad and your blood starts to boil and your temperature rises. He says anger burns hot, but when it's not dealt with, it starts to freeze over. And so resentment is this frozen anger where it gets stuck. And when things get stuck, they go bad, right? So it's this frozen anger. And the Bible often refers to this as bitterness. Bitterness. And that word bitter means it's an acrid taste. In Exodus, the Israelites are wandering through the desert. They come to this one body of water, and they can't drink from it because it's so bitter. Why? Because it's stagnant. It got stuck. And so bitterness it's poisonous, it's bad to the taste, it's not something that we should have. Craig Groeschel says this about bitterness. He says, bitterness is a non-productive, toxic emotion, usually resulting from resentment over unmet needs. And in our series, we've been looking at the different relationship killers. And so the attitude of possessiveness, right, is you belong to me. Dishonesty, I'm more important than you. Impatience, which is I should be in control of you, basically. And all of those do kill relationship, but resentment is the number one relationship killer. It's the number one. It's the top thing. Why? John Gottman, who studies marriage, he's like the supreme researcher on marriage, and he can tell within under 90 seconds if a marriage is going to fail. Why? Because resentment leads to contempt. And once contempt settles in, he says it's basically done. Contempt is when you're like rolling your eyes, and you're just like, oh, and everything about it, you just can't stand that person any longer. When contempt settles in, the relationship is done. The relationship is dead. Resentment opens that door. Resentment, this unresolved, unforgiven anger that's frozen over, will kill your relationships every single time, right? Because resentment says that something isn't going my way. And this is the attitude behind resentment, which is life should go my way. Life should go my way. I am entitled to a certain experience in life. I am entitled to have a happy marriage. I'm entitled to have a successful career. I'm entitled to have grateful children. I'm entitled to have loving parents. I'm entitled to all of that. That's how my life should go. And so we have expectations, and they're not bad expectations. Those are not bad things. It's not bad to want your marriage to be a loving, supportive marriage. It's not bad to want your career to be meaningful and successful and to have people appreciate you. That's not a bad thing. But when those expectations go unmet, we start to feel like life has mistreated me somehow. Like I got a raw deal. It's not fair. I deserve something else. And so I'm holding on to that. I am holding on to that resentment, right? And so not bad expectations, but then we get angry over something. And the reality is, if you're in a relationship with someone long enough, they're going to disappoint you. They just are. You are going to get disappointed. You have this expectation. My friends are going to show up, and they're going to support me exactly how I need to be supported, right? My spouse is going to believe in my dream and say all the right things about it. My children are always going to be grateful and wonderful and well-behaved, and they're going to become successful, contributing members of society. My boss is going to see how hard I work and how much I contribute, and they're going to appreciate that, and they're going to like set me on the path to success. My parents are going to love me for who I am and accept me exactly how I'm made and support me no matter what decisions I make. Those are not bad expectations, but they are eventually going to go unmet. Someone is going to disappoint you. And when your expectation is not met, you get angry. And that's okay. But in the moment, when you were disappointed, you were angry But if you have moved into resentment, you didn't deal with it. You haven't dealt with it, and it froze over. And here's the problem with resentment. It doesn't stay contained, right? It's going to come out somehow, whether with the same person in the same situation or something that sits just right next to it. You know those moments where you've overreacted or someone just really rubs you the wrong way? And sometimes they're just annoying. But often if you're overreacting to a person, it's like, oh no, they are too much like this person who I can't stand. This person who somehow robbed me of something that I deserve. Life should go my way. And so it's going to come out one way or another. And this is how Paul describes the pattern of how it comes out. He says we should get rid of this, but he says get rid of all bitterness, rage and anger, brawling and slander, along with every form of malice. Right? And that's this pattern. It starts with bitterness. Bitterness is this inner condition. It's this inner condition that says, I deserve something else, and I am resentful that I didn't get it. I'm resentful. I should have had something else. And so, and what bitterness does is it starts to raise the standards of how everyone else should treat me, right? Everyone should meet this standard, and it lowers the standards of how I should be able to treat other people, because bitterness opens the door to all those other behaviors. You know, bitterness is seeking something to be made right for us. It lowers the threshold for us in our sinful behavior. And then he says it opens the door for rage and anger. And rage is anger that burns hot. You know, that's what that, and anger is that anger that burns cold. It's both of those. You know, it's that, like, I'm coming in hot and fast, and then it's also like, I am seething. Like, I've let it like sit, and now my anger is like refined. And this rage and anger is mean-spirited. It is a mean-spirited anger. It seeks to punish. It's looking to make someone pay. And it's building a case against other people. You know, and ultimately building the case for yourself. Like, see how great I am and how terrible this person is? Like, and it nurses hurt feelings. It opens the door for us to then behave in a way that doesn't bring life to other people, that kills relationships. And that's where he talks about brawling and slander, because these can both be active and passive. So brawling, he's not talking about going and having a bar fight, right? We hear brawling, you think, like you're throwing stools. And it really means yelling, being quarrelsome, starting, picking a fight. And like I've been married almost 19 years now. Like you wake up some days and you're like, I'm mad about something. I just want to pick a fight. And you're the safest person I'm going to do that. Like, Steve, I've literally had moments where I'm like, I'm not even mad at you, but I really need to fight someone. Like, it's that I'm just picking a fight. I'm quarrelsome, I'm nagging, and it often leads to intensity, right? So that idea of brawling is like, not only am I angry, but I'm coming in hot and letting you know that I am so mad and you have violated something in my life, right? So that's rage and anger, and that's brawling. But then there's also slander, and slander is any malicious talk, and that can be active and that can be passive, right? It can be a passing, cutting comment that is going to cut deep. And I've often had to tell people, like, just because you haven't raised your voice doesn't mean you're not yelling, right? There's some of you who are like, I don't raise my voice, but you're like, oh yeah, but you're still being really mean, right? And so it can be being mean to the person to their face and just saying something that hurts. It's how you talk about people when they're not there. Do you represent them in a way that's negative and hurtful, but somehow you always seem to look great, right? It's meant to cut other people down, that slander. And then he says, so get rid of all that and every form of malice. And here Paul is basically covering all his bases, because that means any kind of ill will that you could have at all. Any ugly attitude, ugly behavior, anything that's going to harm another, he says, get rid of it. Get rid of it. But here's the thing with resentment. When we feel resentful, we are holding on to the wrong that has been done to us, and we nurse it, and we feel like, no, I need this. I need this. But resentment doesn't get you anything. It doesn't benefit you in any way. It doesn't move you forward. It doesn't help you. It doesn't help the situation. Resentment is not helpful. Brene Brown, she says this: when we deny our emotion, it owns us. Sometimes owning our pain and bearing witness to struggle means getting angry. When we deny ourselves the right to be angry, we deny our pain. And this is, so when we talk about not being resentful, we're not talking about just don't acknowledge your pain. Just stuff it down and get over it and don't feel bad. Anger is a sign that something's not right. Anger can help us wake up and say, I'm upset about something. And so it gets our attention. and acknowledging our pain. I tell people all the time, I meet with people regularly, and I always tell them there's no forgiveness without the good and mad phase. Like you have to have that, like, I was hurt, and I feel angry about it. But then she goes on to say this. She says, anger is a catalyst. Holding on to it will make us exhausted and sick. Internalizing anger will take away our joy and spirit. Externalizing anger will make us less effective in our attempts to create change and forge connection. Anger is a powerful catalyst, but a life-sucking companion, right? What a great quote. A powerful catalyst, but a life-sucking companion. Anger can be constructive. And I've had to learn this because, like, conflict is inevitable, and I am conflict avoidant to my core. I hate conflict. I don't like it at all. I will run from it any chance I get. And I've had to learn, like, conflict won't kill you. It probably won't kill the other person, but if you don't deal with it, that will definitely kill the relationship, right? So anger can be a catalyst to say something is not right here. And there's an opportunity for you to know me or for me to know myself better, for us to go deeper in relationship. Anger can be helpful when used constructively. But anger that is unresolved, anger that is held onto, anger that festers becomes a destructive force in your life. Things that get stuck go bad. Things that get stuck go bad. And so anger, when you nurse that wrong, it becomes a life-sucking companion. It takes away all the joy. And it doesn't stay contained. If you're resentful in one place, you will grow resentful in other areas. It's just the way it is. You've given the devil a place to inhabit in your life and to work from. And he comes to kill, steal, and destroy. And so Paul says, get rid of it. Get rid of all of it. Especially, it starts with get rid of all bitterness. Because bitterness is the starting point for all that other stuff. Get rid of it. It doesn't have a place in your life. Why? Why? Because you are called to live differently. And that's what we've come back to over and over in this series is Jesus is our starting point. Jesus set our new ethic for how we are in relationship with one another. Our relationship with him is what steers us to be in relationship with each other. And he says, instead of resentment, Paul says this, instead of resentment, he says, be kind and compassionate to one another, forgiving each other, just as in Christ God forgave you. Follow God's example, therefore, as dearly loved children, and walk in the way of love, just as Christ loved us and gave himself up for us as a fragrant offering and sacrifice to God. So he says, instead of bitterness and resentment, we are to be kind and compassionate. And we talked about these words last week. Kindness means to be moved to action towards good, right? To work good in another person's life actively. And compassion means to feel alongside them, to care deeply, to be moved by their own condition. But he says, above all this, the thing that is most essential is forgiveness. To forgive, not as you want to forgive, but to forgive as Christ has forgiven you. Just like we've said in all these weeks, Jesus doesn't say, love one another as you want to be loved. He says, love one another as I have loved you. That's the new standard. Love each other as I have loved you. And so Paul says, forgive one another, not as you deserve, or not even as you want to be forgiven by other people, but as Christ forgave you. Set that as your example. He says, pattern your life after it. And how has Christ forgiven us? Christ was wronged by us, right? Christ had every reason to be angry and resentful and bitter. And instead, Jesus gave up his life as a willing sacrifice. He didn't see his life as something to be clung to, but as something to use to bring life to others. And Paul says, that's your example. That's what you should pattern your lives after. Not because you're trying to earn God's favor. You are already dearly loved children of God. You're already dearly loved children of God. And when we start there, we can let go of life should go my way. And we can move into the new attitude of heart, which is my way of living should bring life. Instead of life should go my way of living should bring life. Because life should go my way says, well, life isn't going my way. But when we start with Jesus, it says, well, life is going to go your way. Maybe not here, you can't control all of your circumstances, but God has not withheld anything from you. God is for you. God is on your side. God has given you the Holy Spirit. God has promised you a kingdom. Everything is already given. You are already dearly loved children of God. And so when we are resentful, we're very focused on what am I owed? Someone owes me something and someone has to pay it. Right? We're very focused on what we deserve. But here's the thing about forgiving as Christ forgave us. The whole foundation is grace. And grace says you don't have to pay what you owe. It was already paid for you. That's the starting point. And so instead of walking around saying, well, who owes me what? What do I deserve? Life has mistreated me, and I'm going to nurse that and make sure that everybody knows it, and I'm going to get my due. We can move away from that and say, oh, my starting point in life as a follower of Jesus is that my life started when my debt was canceled. My life started when I was forgiven and I was brought back into relationship with God, when I was reconciled with God. That's where my life started. So I don't have to ask, what am I owed? I can start to ask, how can I bring life here? That's the question that I'm called to ask, is what does it look like for me, as far as it is up to me, to bring life to this relationship, to this circumstance, to this situation? That's the call, to forgive as Christ has forgiven us. And when Paul talks about anger, it's very temporary, right? He says, when you are angry, this temporary time when you're angry, resolve it. When he talks about forgiveness, it is ongoing. He says, this is an ongoing practice. It's not forgive once and then it's continually forgive. Live as someone who forgives over and over and over again. And the reason why this is hard is because forgiveness is always a sacrifice. Every time. He says, forgive as Christ gave himself up for you, a willing sacrifice. Forgiveness is always a sacrifice. You are always letting go of something. You don't need to forgive unless you've been hurt. And so forgiveness is letting go of the right to be hurt. It's letting go of the right to be right. It's letting go of the right to retaliate. That's what forgiveness is. It's always a sacrifice. And we are called to move from resentment to reconciliation. We're called to move from life should go my way to my way of living should bring life. And so how do we do that? How do we move from resentment to reconciliation? What does that look like? And Paul says we are to walk in the way of love. And here's the thing about love. It's not a feeling. Paul isn't saying walk in the way of love that you like everyone around you and you feel fond of every person. That's not what love is. Love is willing good in other people's lives. That's what love is actively wanting and pursuing good in other people's lives. It's not a feeling. And James Bryan Smith says this. He says, love is a desire for the well-being of another, so much so that personal sacrifice would not stand in its way. And so that's what it means to say my way of living should bring life. To walk in the way of, to pattern yourself in the way of love means to will good and the well-being of others wherever it is possible to you. And so what does that look like? The first step in moving from resentment to reconciliation is what I call acceptance. And what I mean by that is that we accept people where they are. Paul says this in Romans. He says, accept one another then, just as Christ accepted you in order to bring praise to God. And that word accept means to make room for. It means to welcome someone in. Right? So when you accept someone, you're welcoming them right where they are, just as they are. Just like Christ did for you. Jesus didn't wait until you got your act together to make room for you. He came and pursued you. Right? So acceptance means that we welcome, we make space. Henry Cloud describes it like this in his book, How People Change. He says, to be accepted is to have all your parts, good and bad, received by another without condemnation. So to accept someone is to accept them right where they are, faults and all. Right? That's what it means, that they're not a project, that you're not demanding that they change. It does not mean that you don't want more for them. Right? It doesn't mean that you don't hope for growth and change in their life. But it's saying it's not conditional that I love you or that I care about you and that you grow and change. But he says this, acceptance is a bridge to developing safe and growth-producing relationships. That's what we want, safe and growth-producing relationships, both with God and with people. We can't grow unless we are sure that we are both known and loved. Acceptance bridges this gap between being known and being loved. It is freeing to understand that being known doesn't ruin a relationship, but in fact strengthens it. And so acceptance acknowledges on the outset, whenever we enter into a relationship with someone else, that they're not perfect, They're not perfect. They're going to mess up. They're going to disappoint you. They're going to get it wrong. It acknowledges that. It's not saying I'm only going to be in a relationship with people who get me and do it my way every single time. It acknowledges that. It acknowledges that you're going to fail. You have flaws that you bring to the situation here, and I accept that just as you are, right where you are. John Gottman says that part of this is it's moving from he says it's always thinking with two in mind. Always thinking with two in mind. Moving from a place of where I'm looking out for myself to mutual benefit. Right? I'm not arguing for a place of self-endorsement, and self-interest, but a place of mutual benefit where I'm only thinking about you. It's that I'm thinking about us. Thinking about how both of us thrive in this relationship. And when it comes to being resentful, we have a very hard time accepting people where they are. We have a very hard time accepting the fact that they make mistakes or they get it wrong or there are flaws. And what we start to do is we build a case about how unacceptable they are, right? And we start to, we keep a record of wrong and we overemphasize their flaws and suddenly they're sloppy and they're always late and they're lazy and they're inconsiderate and we start painting with a real broad brush of all the ways that they're wrong, all the ways that they are unacceptable. And Jesus calls us to have a different attitude. Because if we're painting with a broad brush and saying how unacceptable people are, well, then we aren't loving them, right? And so we're not thinking about how am I living in such a way that brings life. I'm thinking, no, life should go my way. And these are all the reasons why you are not making that happen, why this is unacceptable. And again, John Gottman, he talks about how marriage is often healed in the mind first, because you get to choose what you think about other people. You can't choose your circumstances. You can't choose their reactions. You choose your thoughts about other people. And so when you choose to build a case about how unacceptable someone is and all the ways they failed you and all the ways they get it wrong and all the things that are bad about them, you're going to be resentful. But you can choose to build a case in their favor. You get to choose that. You can choose to think thoughts that benefit both of you. And so I know for myself, when I fall into that pattern of I'm the only one, or I always have to, or no one else, right? And I know this happens to me when I'm tired and I do all the cooking in our house. I'm sure there's another time where I will tell you some of the stories of when Steve has tried to cook and has not gone very well, right? So I do all the cooking in our house, and there are times where I come home from work and I'm cooking, I'm chopping, and I just start to feel like I'm the only one who does this. And you get, that resentful voice that pops up, whatever that is, at work, with your friends. I'm the only one. And then I have to step back and go, you're right. I am the only one who chops vegetables, but Steve is the only one who takes out the trash, right? I'm never I'm going to take out the trash. I didn't even know how to use our washing machine until last week. So I don't do our laundry. Steve does our laundry. And I was literally trying to do something. I don't know where to put the soap in, and he had to show me the hidden compartment, right? So when I step back and go, yeah, there's things that I do, but I can appreciate what other people do. I get to choose what I focus on, right? You get to choose your thoughts. And here's the thing. When you build a case of appreciation, sometimes you have to dig deep, right? There are some people where the list is not very long, and that's true. I love what Brené Brown says. She says, most people are doing the best with what they have. Most people have a lot. There are some people who don't have very much, right? And they're doing the best with what they have. They might not have a great deal of emotional maturity or consideration, but can you find something that you appreciate about that person? Well, even if it's I appreciate how passionate they are, even when they're aiming it at me in a really immature way. You can find something to say, I can think positively about this person. It doesn't mean I dismiss everything else. But can you start with acceptance, right? Because we can't grow without acceptance. And there's no reconciliation without that. If people don't feel like they're loved and they're known, they're not going to grow. They're going to be defensive and they're going to hide. That's just the way it is. And so we have to start with acceptance. And the second step to move from resentment to reconciliation is what I call clarity. And if you've been in a conversation with me at all, you've heard me say over and over again, clarity is kindness. Clarity is kindness. When you are clear about things, it is kind to both you and the other person. When people know what's going on. And here's the thing about resentment. It often comes from unmet expectations. But here's the thing about expectations. Unspoken expectations go unmet. Unspoken expectations go unmet. And when you have an expectation that's not been met, and you haven't spoken it, right? And you just assume like, well, you should know what I expect. That is definitely the attitude of life should go my way. Life should go my way, and I shouldn't even have to ask you or make clear, right? I shouldn't have to refine my expectations because I expect life to work out this way and all of you to fall in line. But when we don't clarify our expectations, people will not meet them. Sometimes they will not meet them because they are unrealistic. Sometimes you have set an expectation for someone that they have not agreed to, and that if you were to ask them, they'd say, I'm not capable of doing that. No way. Like if that's the condition, this is not going to work. So sometimes your expectations are unrealistic, and sometimes someone's just unaware. They didn't know that you expected that. And so they keep violating it, and you think, well, you should know. If you knew me, you would know. That's not fair. That's not fair or loving. To expect everyone to know your expectations without having to say it is not fair or loving. Right? People are going to not meet your expectations sometimes, and we need to gain clarity around that. And Paul says this, make allowance for each other's faults. Forgive anyone who offends you. And so it's not bad to have expectations. Again, John Gottman, he talks about how in marriages, if you keep lowering your expectation to the point of dissatisfaction, your marriage will fail. Right? If you're like, well, I'm just going to expect you never to remember my birthday or never to have a meaningful conversation. I just got to keep lowering my expectations till I don't, it doesn't even matter anymore. That's not good, right? We need to have expectations with one another. But Paul says, we need to be aware that people are going to offend us, and we need to make allowance for that. And so one of the ways that I think we can gain clarity is realizing what level of offense are we dealing with, right? What level of offense are we dealing with? And I break it up into 3 categories. One, there's green. There's the green level. And the green level, these are like minor things that you actually you could willingly let go of. They're not things that irritate you that you just keep sweeping under the rug thinking it's not a big deal, but really it's driving me crazy, right? These are the things where you're like, I don't love that. I wish that were different, but it's okay. Like, for example, Steve has this habit, and he's had it for 19 years, of he randomly finds one item in the kitchen that he puts in the wrong spot. And it changes this week. I just opened it. I'm like, Steve, why are the round Tupperware not with the other round? Like goes with like. Now he's moving the Tupperware. Last week it was the vegetable peeler. We have one vegetable peeler. It goes with all the other things that are kind of sharp, and he kept putting it with the baking stuff. I'm like, it doesn't go there. It's never gone there, right? He's done this our whole marriage, all the time. And I'm like, sometimes it's like a scavenger hunt, where I'm like, oh, I wonder where that thing is. It's not where it belongs. So where could Steve have thought to put it, right? And this is something where it's like, would I love Steve to know that the kitchen is organized this way and to always do it? I would love that. Am I willing to let it go? Sure. It's just not that big a deal, and there's some humor in it between us. For me, it was a couple of years ago, but I came outside and I was like, whose tissue is this? And Steve goes, that's your tissue. I'm like, what? And he goes, you leave tissues around the house all the time. And I was like, no, I don't. He goes, yes, you do. And finally, I started to see, I'm like, I do leave tissues around the house all the time. I don't know. That's a very gross habit. And I do that all the time, and I had no idea, right? Or I leave drinks with I just don't drink the last couple sips. I don't know why. It just I get to the last couple sips. I'm like, I don't want to drink that. That's gross to me. And so he's learned to be like, there's Meredith's half-finished drink sitting on the table, right? And there's a few of them all around the house. And this is something where it's like, would Steve love that I always remember to throw my tissue away or finish my drinks? He would love that. Can we let that go? Sure. So a green offense is something where you're like, you know what? In the end, I can tell you that I think that it's funny. I can have humor. I know that it's not malicious. It really doesn't bother me. In the end, it's not something that bothers me at all. So green, know if it's a green, right? And then kind of let it go if you can let it go. Because if you keep coming to people with all the offenses, at some point they're going to be like, what? Oh, why are you so bent out of shape about everything, right? And then there's the yellow. And yellow is, it's not that big of a deal, but I can't let it go, right? If I don't say something, I am going to store it up, and that's not going to be good, right? So it's not a deal killer. It's not a relationship killer, but it is something where you're like, I have to address it. So a little while ago, Steve and I were with a group of people, and he made a joke, right? And he made a joke, and it was kind of at my expense, and I really didn't like it, And so, but I knew that it wasn't malicious. I knew that he wasn't trying to hurt my feelings or anything, but it just stuck with me. And so the next day, we were in the car and we were driving. I'm like, hey, this is not a big deal. I know you didn't mean to hurt my feelings, but it did kind of hurt my feelings. And he was like, oh, I'm so sorry, right? Yellow offense, where it's like, I don't need us to go I don't need to have a long conversation about it. I don't need you to be desperately sorry, or it's just one of those things where it's like, it's irritating enough that I have to say something because it's not going away. Like I can't just let it go, right? So that's a yellow offense. And those are important to know, and even to be able to, this is language that we use with each other. Like this is just a yellow thing, right? And then there's red. And red is deal killers, right? Those are relationship breakers, and they can be big and small things, right? They can be like big things like how we interact with our in-laws, or they can be small things like how we keep the house clean, or whether we keep the TV on at night, or how where we go out for dinner. These can be small things, but they can be enough that if you don't deal with it, you start to think this person doesn't love me. Like if you persist in this behavior, it's going to ruin our relationship. And it doesn't mean if it's a red that you need to get your way. Like it's not like this is a red issue, so you have to do it my way. This is a red offense, and so we have to come up with some sort of compromise. We have to navigate this together. We have to figure out something, and it's not something that I can just say it's not a big deal. It is a big deal. For whatever reason, it's a big deal. And so here's the problem with red offenses. If you don't deal with red level offenses, you will have resentment, and every other offense starts to go red. Everything goes red. Like if you've got like relationship killer stuff that you're not dealing with, you start to pile up, and every small thing they do suddenly feels like, see, it's all terrible. So I met with someone several times at a different church who was struggling in her marriage, and she was disappointed, and she was upset, and she was resentful, and she had some expectations that had gone unmet. And so, one of those was that her husband was kind of cutting with his words. He was sarcastic and not always kind, and she felt like he was disingenuous. Like he'd present himself as like, hey, he was a teacher, like, hey, I'm like Mr. Everybody loves me over here, but wasn't very nice at home, right? And that's a legit expectation to say, hey, I expect to be treated with respect and dignity in the way that we talk with one another. And so there were some red offenses there, but the problem is her expectations weren't necessarily wrong, but the way she dealt with them had been wrong, and so they had piled up. And as we're talking, I was like, oh my goodness, we can't see the forest through the trees anymore. Like every minor thing feels like it's a deal killer at this point. And she had gotten stuck. Remember, things that get stuck go bad. And if you ever come to me and talk to me about your marriage, I'm going to tell you the same thing. Like you got 3 options, right? You can, 1, keep it stuck, and it's going to stay the same way. It'll deteriorate, but it's not going to get better if you keep doing the same thing. You can end your marriage, right, and like just be done with it, or you can get help. Because and it doesn't seem like you want either of these, right? You don't necessarily want your marriage to end if you're coming and talking to me, and you don't want it to stay the same, so you got to get help, and you got to get movement in there. And that's the same for anything where if you're at work and you're stuck, you got those same 3 options, right? You can keep doing the same thing. It's not going to change. You can find another job, or you can figure a new way out. Get some help and get some momentum. Those are your options in these situations. And so when we get stuck, we need to move. One way or another, we need to move because it's just going to get worse. And so expectations, being clear on your expectations, being clear on your level of offense allows the way for reconciliation because you know what you're dealing with. You know what level we're dealing with. If it's red, like that's something you have to be like, we have to stop everything and deal with this. If it's yellow, you're like it's a heads up, right? If it's green, you can let it go, right? And then the last thing that makes reconciliation possible, moving from resentment to reconciliation, is forgiveness. And again, just like we said last week, you don't need patience if you're not irritated, right? You don't need patience to eat an ice cream sundae. You need patience when someone is bothering you. You don't need to forgive unless you've been wronged, right? Forgiveness comes because someone has hurt you. Something has not gone right. That's when we need to forgive. And forgiveness is always a sacrifice. We said forgiveness is always a sacrifice. And Paul says this, if it is possible, as far as it depends on you, live at peace with everyone. And I often talk about this, you've probably seen this before, that when we're in right relationship, we're in the center together. And when relationship is broken, we end up on 2 sides, right? And reconciliation looks like meeting back in the center. And what I always say is you have to walk your half. That's what Paul's saying there. As far as it is up to you, you walk your half. It is not conditional on whether this person walks their half or not, whether they want to walk their half or not, whether they even recognize that they have a half to walk. That's not what Paul says. He now says, forgive as long as everybody's on the same page and it's mutual and you're all moving in the same direction. Nope. He says, as far as it is up to you, live at peace with everyone around you. That's what forgiveness looks like. And like I said, there's no forgiveness without the good and mad phase, right? To forgive means there has been an offense. You have to be able to name the offense. And sometimes that forgiveness is not possible with the person on this side of heaven, right? Sometimes they're not here any longer. Sometimes they're not capable of it. It's just that conversation is not going to be constructive. Sometimes they're not willing. Whatever that is, it doesn't prohibit you from doing your work. Because forgiveness doesn't mean that you like them. Right? That's not what forgiveness. It doesn't mean like you like them and you think fondly of them. Forgiveness means you stop hitting back. Forgiveness means you stop seeking their punishment. Right? That's what forgiveness means. And so forgiveness means that you can genuinely pray that God would show up in their lives in whatever way they need, right? And that you genuinely will their well-being. And here's the thing. Repentance is good for people, right? Confession is good for people. Healing is good for people. It's not wrong to pray, God, would you show up? This person has a destructive pattern in their lives. I pray that you would show up and make that clear to them. I pray that you would bring them to a place of repentance. That is willing good in their lives. Not like, I pray you'd get them, right? That's not what we want. But that you'd show up exactly how they need. I once had a mentor say, gospel is good news, but sometimes it feels bad before it feels good, right? So sometimes they might need a little bad news before they can really hear the good news. But when you're praying that, you're not emphasis on the bad. You really want whatever is best for them. Doesn't mean that you have to be back in a relationship, right? We talked about last week. You can have forgiveness and a boundary. Those are possible. But here's the thing about withholding forgiveness. If you withhold forgiveness over here, you have opened the door. You've sectioned off a place in your life to start withholding forgiveness over here and over here and over here because it becomes a pattern. And if you make the sacrifice of forgiveness over here, it also spills out. It spills out to a life of love. It spills out to a life that glorifies God. You get to choose. But it is a sacrifice. Paul frames forgiveness as a sacrifice. You have to let go of your right to hit back, your right to be right, your right to be hurt. And so in all of this, in this whole series, as we've talked about what it looks like to be in relationship with one another, we've continued to come back to, you know what? Relationship is grounded in our relationship with Jesus first. That's our starting point. And often, left to our own devices, our attitude of heart is one that is selfish and self-seeking, right? With possessiveness, you belong to me. With dishonesty, I'm more important than you. With impatience, I should be in control. And with resentment, life should go my way. And the reality is we think we want those things. You know, we think that would make life better, but the reality is it doesn't. It doesn't get us what we want because it stops seeing other people as people. And all of them are just a means to get what I want. And that's not what Jesus invited us into. He's invited us into loving one another. And when we start with Jesus, he changes our attitude of heart. And he says, instead of possessiveness, he says, we belong to one another. You know, we are essential to one another. The peace of Christ should be in control of me, and my way of living should bring life. That's the attitude that God gives us. This attitude where relationship is built up and where we're restored to one another. And you can't control your circumstances. You can't control what other people do, but you can choose your attitude and you can choose your behavior. Over and over again, you have decision rights when it comes to that. You can choose what you focus on. You can choose how you choose to behave. And so as we close today, and close this series, we're going to close with communion today. And the reason why I wanted to close with communion, I'm going to invite our ushers. You can go ahead and start handing communion out. The reason why I wanted to close with communion is, again, the whole groundwork of everything that we've been called to do and to be in relationship with one another is not love each other as you want to be loved. Jesus changed the standard. He said, love one another as I have loved you. And I have loved you so thoroughly and so completely that I've held nothing back from you. That's what he tells us. And so when we come together around communion, communion means is being in community with one another, being connected to one another. When we take communion together, we are once again reminded that what unites us is not that we all think the same thing, or that we all vote the same way, or that we all like the same music, or do the same activities. What brings us together is that we are forgiven in the same way, that we are accepted in the same way, that we are loved in the same way, since we are already dearly loved children of God. That you don't have to earn it. You don't have to perform for it. That's what unites us. And so when we come together around communion, we remember that God has given everything for us, that life has already gone your way in Jesus. It's already gone your way, and that He becomes our standard for how we love one another. Therefore, remember that on the night that our Lord Jesus was betrayed, He took bread, and after giving thanks, He gave it to His disciples, and He said, "Take, eat. This is my body, which is given for you. Whenever you do this, do it in remembrance of me." So take and eat the body that was freely given for you. And in the same way, after supper, He took the cup of wine, and after giving thanks, He gave it to His disciples, and He said, "Drink this, all of you. For this is my blood, which is poured out for you and for many for the forgiveness of sins. Whenever you do this, do it in remembrance of me." So take and drink that cup of forgiveness. Let us pray. Gracious God, thank you for reminding us what unites us and what's changed us, what frees us, Lord. We're so grateful for who you are and what you've done. God, help us to first remember how you have loved us, and let us live out of that love, Lord. Let us live in love as you have lived and loved. Help us to move from a place where we are defensive and posturing and trying to get our own way to where we can live freely, connected and sacrificially. We're so grateful, Jesus. Thank you for this time in this series and this reminder of how to love one another. We pray this in Jesus' name.